Vikings weren't just fierce and violent, they also possessed remarkable, almost invisible ingenuity. What do you think they used to survive the long, dark nights of the Scandinavian winter? The cold could kill a Viking faster than a Saxon or Frankish sword. But these sea wolves, who raided far to the south, had a secret that allowed them to create portable, long-burning sources of heat. Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how ordinary animal fat, which is considered waste today, was turned into a self-contained heater capable of burning for a whole day. What if I told you that everything you believed about Viking life is not true? First, let's figure out what a Scandinavian winter was like in the 8th, 11th centuries, when there was no central heating or electricity. The cold was not just uncomfortable, but a constant, deadly threat that penetrated poorly insulated longhouses and the sails of dracars. Surviving in such a climate without an effective source of heat was virtually impossible, and a regular fire required constant attention and a huge amount of dry wood. It was these harsh conditions that forced the Vikings to turn to the most accessible and powerful resource, the gifts of northern nature. This resource was fat, which remained in huge quantities after the slaughter of hunted animals, whether sea beasts or wild deer, and which would otherwise have been simply thrown away or used to impregnate hides. The secret lay in the creation of the so-called fat lamp, which was not just a source of light, but a real mini heater. It was a simple stone bowl carved out of slate or other durable stone. In this uncomplicated device, the Scandinavians combined the simplest materials to create a real technological marvel of their time. The bowl was filled with melted animal fat, seal, whale, or wild pig fat, which was specially fattened for this purpose. It was fat, due to its high calorie content and density, that became the ideal fuel for slow but continuous burning. Moss or dry, loosened cotton, which could be imported from southern lands as a luxury item, was used as a wick. Dry, loose lichen or grass fibers, which could be found in abundance in local swamps, were also suitable. The wick was placed in the bowl so that one end was immersed in the fat and the other, slightly elongated end was above the fuel level. It was evenly saturated with fat, starting a process that was very similar to the burning of modern wax candles, but with much greater heat output. The burning of such a lamp was slow and steady. It did not produce a bright, flickering flame like a bonfire, but radiated an even and constant heat. This heat, though small, was critical for heating a small space, especially during long night watches. The fat burned very economically. One large lamp filled with fat could burn for 12 to 24 hours without the need for refueling. This was a huge advantage over a conventional bonfire, which required adding wood every few hours. Such lamps were used not only in homes, but also in workshops, and most importantly, on dracars, where open fires were too dangerous. On a ship, such a lamp became the only source of light and heat for the crew. Do you think that such a simple source of heat as an oil lamp could really have radically changed the lives of the Vikings? Or is this just an exaggeration? Share your opinion in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Are you ready to learn the truth about the Vikings' most important resource? The fat used in these lamps was not just fuel, but a symbol of the incredible, virtually waste-free economy of the Northerners. Whales and seals, which were important hunting targets for the Vikings, provided not only meat and skins, but also a huge amount of fat, which became critical for survival. The capture of a whale or large seal was a real event, providing the tribe with resources for many months to come. The fat was extracted by melting. This process, called rendering, was labor-intensive but vital. Pieces of fat were cut up and slowly heated in large cauldrons to separate the pure fat from the pulp and other impurities. The purified fat, or tallow, had a consistency similar to thick oil. It was poured into special leather bags or clay vessels, where it solidified into a dense mass that was convenient for storage and transportation. It was this purified fat, thanks to its high purity, that burned most evenly and almost odorlessly. Unpurified fat smoked and emitted a strong, unpleasant odor, which made it unsuitable for use in enclosed spaces. The most valuable fat was that obtained from marine mammals. It had the highest calorie content and the lowest melting point, which allowed it to melt easily and rise up the wick. Using animal fat as fuel was a brilliant solution from a logistical point of view. The Vikings did not waste precious wood, which was needed for building houses and ships on heating. Wood was too valuable a resource to burn for no reason. This technology allowed them to make long sea voyages. It was impossible to store a large supply of firewood on a drakkar, but a few barrels of fat provided the crew with light, heat, and the ability to cook food. Fat also played a role in strengthening social ties. A successful whale hunt provided warmth and light not only to one family, but to the entire community, which strengthened the leader's authority and united the tribe. Harvesting and processing fat required collective labor, but it was worth it. Every drop of this resource was worth its weight in gold, becoming a symbol of northern ingenuity and the ability to live in harmony with the harsh natural environment. But knowledge about fat was only part of the secret. Are you ready to learn how the Vikings turned simple moss into a wick that could burn for a whole day? And why this element was more important than the fat itself? Guess how long it took to create the perfect wick? Creating the perfect wick for a fat lamp required no less skill than forging a sword. The efficiency of the entire system depended on the quality of the wick, and the Vikings perfected this process to an incredible degree. They needed a material that could slowly and evenly absorb fat without burning too quickly or going out. Please like for this unique information. The ideal material turned out to be dry sphagnum, a special type of moss that grew in abundance in Scandinavian bogs. Its fibrous, spongy structure was perfect for capillary rise of fat to the flame. The moss was carefully collected, dried, and loosened. Then it was twisted into a tight bundle or laid in layers in a bowl, creating a flat, slow-burning surface. Sometimes the moss was mixed with flax or hemp fibers, which, although more expensive, made the wick more durable and ensured more even burning. Flax was particularly valuable because it burned longer and hardly smoldered at all. An important step was the treatment of the wick. To improve its burning and prevent rapid combustion, the moss could be impregnated with a salt solution or ash. This made the fibers more resistant to high temperatures. The secret to long burning was the right ratio of wick to fat. The wick should not be too thick, otherwise the flame would be too large and burn the fat quickly. If the wick was too thin, the flame was weak and could go out. The craftsman had to find the right balance to ensure an even, gentle burn that provided maximum heat and light with minimum fuel consumption. In a stone bowl, the wick did not burn like in a regular candle. It did not burn itself, but served as a conduit for the fat, which evaporated and burned. Thus, the flame was fed not by fibers, but by fuel. As it burned, the wick slowly charred at the tip, and had to be periodically adjusted or slightly pulled out. This simple procedure allowed the flame to be maintained at an optimal level for many hours. Thus, the wick was not just a detail, but the heart of the oil lamp. It turned viscous fat into gaseous fuel, which, when burned, provided heat and light. And this was a real skill. What you are about to learn will change your perception of Viking craftsmanship. The stone bowl was the basis of the entire structure. It had to be durable, fireproof, and deep enough to hold the supply of fat needed for long-term burning. The material most often used for such bowls was steatite, or soapstone. Steatite is a soft, easily workable, yet highly fire-resistant stone that could be found in Scandinavia. It was easy to cut with a knife or chisel with simple stone tools. Master carvers carved bowls with flat bottoms and relatively thin walls. The walls had to be of optimal thickness so that the stone would not crack from heating, but also not too thick so as not to absorb too much heat. To improve combustion and preserve the fat, stone bowls were often made with a small groove or recess for the wick. This allowed the wick to remain constantly in the fat, preventing it from drying out. Some bowls had special protrusions or handles so that they could be easily carried without burning your hands. This was important because lamps were often moved from one room to another or taken outside. The largest bowls, used to heat large rooms, could reach up to 1/2 meter in diameter and hold several liters of fat. These were no longer just lamps, but real heating devices. The stone, heated by the flame, accumulated heat and then slowly released it into the surrounding space. This provided an additional heating effect, turning the lamp into a kind of heat accumulator. The shape of the bowl was also well thought out. The wide neck provided access to the oxygen needed for combustion, and the depth prevented the melted fat from flowing out. Making such a bowl was a long and painstaking process that required patience and skill. A well-made steatite lamp could last for centuries, being passed down from generation to generation. Thus, the stone bowl was the ideal vessel for the Vikings' eternal fire. It was durable, fireproof, and used heat efficiently. But even the most durable stone could not replace thermal insulation. In the next chapter, we will talk about how the Vikings turned ordinary resin into a real building material. What if I told you that the Vikings used resin for more than just ships? Resin, or tar, played a critical role in Viking life, far beyond shipbuilding. It was a versatile material that was used as an adhesive, sealant, and most importantly, as insulation for homes and workshops. This dark, viscous material was a product of distilling pine wood, and its production was one of the key crafts of the Northerners. The resin was extracted in special pits or ovens, where pine logs slowly smoldered without access to air. This process required great skill and knowledge of the correct temperature regime. The resulting tar was indispensable in the construction of houses. It was used to impregnate the lower crowns of longhouses and posts dug into the ground to protect the wood from rot and moisture. Resin was the best natural preservative. It was used to coat the joints and cracks in the walls and roofs of longhouses, creating an airtight barrier. This helped to keep the precious heat produced by oil lamps and hearths inside the room. Mixed with sand or clay, resin turned into a mortar that was used to secure stones in hearths and walls. It was stronger and more durable than ordinary clay. In addition, resin served as the main sealant for dracars. It was used to coat the seams between the planks of the hull, making the ship watertight. This allowed the Vikings to make long voyages. Resin was also used in medicine and everyday life. It was used to treat leather to make it waterproof and as an adhesive to repair broken objects. It also played a role in firewood preparation. Tar-soaked wood chips were ideal for starting fires, as they burned even in wet weather. Resin production was so important that it was considered a matter of state. Kings and jarls controlled the process, as without resin there would be no ships or warm houses. Resin was thus the true gold of the North. It allowed the Vikings to withstand the elements and build their world. It was the silent, invisible foundation of their expansion. Are you ready to learn a secret that will change your life? The Vikings' philosophy was based on maximizing the use of resources. They lived in conditions of scarcity, and throwing anything away was an unaffordable luxury. That is why waste from butchering animals did not become garbage, but valuable raw materials, including for heating. Fat that was too dirty or smelly to be used in lamps inside the house was used for other, equally important purposes. It became fuel for outdoor lighting and signal fires. Such secondary fat, for example, was used to fuel large torches that were installed at the entrance to settlements or at piers. They burned longer than ordinary firewood and did not require constant attention. Resin, which was also a byproduct, was mixed with fat and used to impregnate firewood and torches. This made the wood waterproof and ensured that it would burn even after rain. The burnt remains of bones and horns left over from the manufacture of tools and jewelry were also put to good use. They could be crushed and mixed with fat to produce a denser, slower-burning fuel. The Vikings even used animal waste. Dried manure from large animals, mixed with fat, could serve as a good fuel where there were no forests. This was especially true for settlements in Iceland or Greenland. Leather and fur scraps that were unsuitable for clothing could also be soaked in fat and used as slow-burning fuel. They did not produce a large flame, but served as an excellent source of smoke to repel insects. This waste economy was not just thriftiness, but a principle of survival. Every resource was used to the fullest, allowing the community to thrive in harsh conditions. Everything we consider trash today was a potential resource for the Vikings. They saw value in what nature gave them and knew how to get the most out of it. The Vikings did not have recycling technology in the modern sense, but their intuitive understanding of the cyclical nature of nature was ingenious. They were true masters of recycling. But how effective were all these measures against the Northerners' greatest enemy, the icy sea? Life on a drakkar during a voyage was a harsh ordeal. The cold sea, piercing wind, and constant dampness made heating a critical task. It was not possible to build a large fire on board, but the Vikings found a way to ensure a minimum level of comfort. Oil lamps were the only safe source of light and heat on the ship. They were installed in places protected from the wind, such as below deck or in small cabins, if available. For sea voyages, special deeper stone or clay lamps were used, which were resistant to rocking. Their design was thought out so that the fat would not spill even in heavy seas. The crew of the drakkar used oil lamps not only for heating, they were used to heat water for drinking and cooking. This was the only way to prepare hot soup or mix dry food. The heat from the lamps, even a little, was super important for drying wet clothes. A small group of sailors could surround themselves with lamps to dry their wool tunics and cloaks a bit. Resin also played a role in creating a thermal cocoon on the ship. The wooden parts of the drakkar were heavily impregnated with resin, which made the wood waterproof and reduced heat loss. Below deck and in the hold, resin helped to create a drier and warmer microclimate, which was important for the health of the crew and the preservation of provisions. In addition, fat was used to impregnate woolen and leather items, making them more waterproof and warm. It was a kind of heat treatment for clothing. Thus, the fat lamp and resin were not just conveniences, but part of the ship's life support system. They allowed the Vikings to survive on the open sea. The light of the oil lamp determined the rhythm of Viking life during the long winter nights. In Scandinavia, where daylight hours in winter last only a few hours, artificial lighting was not a luxury, but a necessity. The lamp allowed people to extend their working and leisure time. Under the light of the lamps, craftsmen continued their work. Leatherworkers could sew, jewelers could forge jewelry, and women could spin and weave. It was a time of intense craftsmanship. The light was bright enough for reading and writing runes. Scholars and skalds could write down sagas, study texts, and pass on knowledge despite the darkness outside. The lamps created a source of light and heat in the longhouse, around which the whole community gathered. It was a place for socializing, storytelling, and strengthening family ties. The burning of fat, although slow, was uniform. This served as a kind of clock for the Vikings. They could estimate the time that had passed by the level of fat in the bowl or by how often the wick needed to be adjusted. Unlike a fire, which cast flickering and uneven shadows, a fat lamp provided a soft, steady light. This reduced eye strain and made work more comfortable. Light also played an important psychological role. In the pitch darkness of the polar night, even a small, steady flame was a symbol of hope, life, and man's victory over the elements. Lamps were also used for religious purposes. Their light could accompany rituals and sacrifices, symbolizing eternal fire and a connection with the gods. Thus, the oil lamp was not just a tool, it was part of the culture, a symbol of human resilience and the ability to adapt to the harshest conditions. The manufacture of fat lamps and the processing of fat was a separate, respected craft in Viking society. These master craftsmen, who knew the secrets of stone, fat, and wicks, were valued no less than blacksmiths. The health and comfort of the community depended on their skills. Stone carvers had to know the properties of different types of rock. They selected the best soapstone, knew how to find its deposits, and how to process it correctly. This required geological knowledge. They mastered the technique of carving, which allowed them to create a smooth and even inner surface of the bowl. The smoother the surface, the better the lamp burned. Fat masters were experts in rendering tallow. They knew how to purify fat of impurities so that it burned without odor or soot. This process was akin to alchemy. They were also responsible for harvesting and processing wick material. They knew which types of moss or fibers burned best and how to prepare them properly. Their knowledge was critical to traders. A well-made lamp and purified fat were valuable commodities that the Vikings traded for southern goods. The craft was passed down from generation to generation. The secrets of stone processing, knowledge of sphagnum moss, and smelting techniques were family treasures. In a society where everyone had to be a jack of all trades, these specialists still stood out. They were the engineers of their time, solving the most important everyday problems. The secret to the longevity of the fat lamp lay in its integrity as an engineering system. It was a perfect combination of material, fuel, and wick, designed for specific climatic conditions. It was an example of how a simple solution could be ingenious. The stearite bowl provided stability and thermal inertia. It maintained the temperature of the fat, preventing it from solidifying quickly, which ensured continuous burning. High-calorie seal or whale fat was the ideal fuel. It was dense, burned slowly, and did not require frequent refueling. The sphagnum wick, thanks to its spongy structure, ensured an even rise of fuel. It did not burn itself, but served only as a conductor. Altogether, this created a system capable of operating autonomously for a long time with minimal human control. This was a huge advantage. These lamps were versatile. They worked in the home, on ships, and in field camps. They did not require any special conditions other than protection from strong winds. They could be easily extinguished by simply covering them with a lid, and just as easily lit again. This made them safe and convenient to use. Their durability was also linked to their maintainability. The stone bowl did not break, and the wick and fat could be easily replaced. They were part of the Vikings' well-established survival system. Their effectiveness had been proven over centuries of use in the harshest conditions. All this makes the fat lamp not just a light source, but a symbol of northern engineering genius. It was the key to exploration and survival in the icy world of the north. We conclude our journey into the world of hidden Viking technology, where animal fat became a source of light and heat for a day. The fat lamp, stone bowl, and sphagnum wick were all part of an ingenious, self-sufficient system that allowed northerners to survive and thrive. Their ability to turn waste into fuel and natural materials into tools for survival is an example of how high ingenuity can compensate for the lack of sophisticated technology. This story teaches us to appreciate simple solutions and see the potential in resources that we ignore today. The Vikings proved that even in the harshest climate, comfort can be created if the problem is approached with intelligence and respect for nature. Which Viking technology do you think is the most ingenious? The creation of a long-burning fat lamp or the masterful use of resin in construction? Suggest topics for future videos you would like to see in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new episodes.